It was 3 a.m. The apostolic palace was locked down, wrapped in the profound, sacred silence of the pre-dawn hours. My post was near the private papal apartments. The silence was shattered not by an external threat, but by an internal, desperate urgency. The Cardinal Secretary of State, the Holy Father's most trusted confidant, burst into the corridor. His usual composure, his impeccable, unhurried gait were gone. He moved with a speed born of terror, clutching a worn leather briefcase to his chest. His face, normally a canvas of serene diplomacy, was stark white. "Holy Father," his voice was a ragged whisper that nonetheless echoed in the silence. Pope Leo XIV, roused by the sound, appeared at the door of his private quarters in the simple white cassock he wore to sleep. No vestments, no protocol. Just the pastor, awakened by the wolves. "Your Holiness," the cardinal's voice trembled, "I must show you something that cannot wait for dawn." He placed the briefcase on the Pope's simple wooden desk. When he snapped it open, confidential folders, some bearing the seals of Vatican dicasteries, others looking like intercepted private correspondence, spilled across the wood. The Pope did not immediately touch the papers. He looked down, then closed his eyes for a long moment. It was not the look of a man in pain, but of a shepherd who had just seen the undeniable proof that 3 of his chosen bishops had betrayed their sacred vows, their church, and their God. I stood sentinel, a silent, immobile witness. I saw the terrible weight settling upon that man's shoulders, the burden of knowing he must amputate to save the entire body of the church. It was a devastating, necessary justice. This midnight confrontation was the apex of a crisis that had begun 2 days earlier, quietly, almost innocuously. It started during a calm Roman autumn afternoon. I was on the post connecting the papal apartments to the Secretariat of State. The routine was predictable. Murmurs of administration, scheduled meetings. Nothing suggested this afternoon would mark the genesis of an ecclesiastical earthquake. Around 4 p.m., the first sign of anomaly. The Cardinal Secretary of State, always measured, crossed the corridor at an unusually rapid pace. Under his arm, he carried a brown leather folder, the kind reserved for documents of the highest classification. His face was etched with a concern I had never witnessed. Minutes later, the prefect of the Congregation for Bishops arrived, summoned urgently. Then followed the prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, the dean of the College of Cardinals, even the Camerlengo, all men of ultimate authority and trust, all bearing expressions of contained urgency. The emergency meeting stretched late into the night. When the cardinals finally emerged near 10 p.m., their faces showed more than fatigue. There was contained indignation, incredulity, and a sheer, unyielding determination. My comrade, a guard posted in another sector, later confided, "For a brief moment, as the door cracked open, he caught fragments of a blood-chilling conversation. He heard the Cardinal Secretary say, his voice tight, 3 bishops, 3, and we are not speaking of administrative errors or pastoral imprudence." The gravity in the tone was absolute. The comrade had seen documents scattered across the table, some official, others looking like intercepted private correspondence. What they had discovered was so serious it demanded immediate, unprecedented action. As I reconstructed the story from guarded whispers among trusted staff in the following days, I learned the truth. A routine audit of diocesan archives uncovered irregularities in 3 separate dioceses across Europe. Deepening the investigation, officials found something far worse, a coordinated pattern of systematic doctrinal deviation.
The 3 bishops had not merely promoted teachings contrary to the magisterium from their episcopal chairs. They had established an active network of collaboration between their dioceses to implement unauthorized liturgical changes, promote radical, heterodox theology in their seminaries, and, most damningly, ordain priests whose doctrinal convictions were openly hostile to the Catholic faith. The seized documents included correspondence between the three prelates, discussing their strategy of progressive transformation from within. They spoke of overcoming obsolete dogmas and adapting the Church to the present century by flooding the clergy ranks with like-minded radical reformists. "This is not legitimate theological dissent," the prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith had declared, his voice ringing with sorrowful finality. "It is deliberate treason against the deposit of faith. They have violated their episcopal oath consciously and systematically." The magnitude of the betrayal was stunning. It was a slow-motion coup, attempting to steal the Church's future from beneath its own hierarchical structure. The following morning, the atmosphere in the Vatican had changed utterly. The air was dense, heavy with a tension few fully understood. I saw the elderly Cardinal Ottaviani, one of the Curia's most veteran prelates, walking towards the private chapel at an unusually early hour. His face, normally serene, showed deep preoccupation. As he passed my post, I heard him murmur, "Lord, protect your Church." In the corridors, small groups of priests and monsignors whispered. "It's true about the bishops," I caught one fragment. "They say the documentary evidence is conclusive." The prefect of seminaries entered the papal apartments with a devastated expression. He carried reports containing testimonies from faithful seminarians who had been systematically marginalized or expelled for defending orthodoxy, while those who embraced the radical, progressive new theologies were promoted and favored. "Father, what are we to do if this is true?" a young priest asked an older one in the Clementine Hall. "If it is true," the veteran replied, his voice weary, "then we have been negligent in our watch, and now there must be justice." The situation escalated dramatically the following day when fragments of the controversy inevitably filtered beyond the Vatican walls. Conservative Catholic papers published vague but chilling articles, grave irregularities in European dioceses under Vatican investigation. They lacked details, but the scent of scandal was in the air. More worryingly, the bishops implicated began their counterattack. One of them immediately convened a press conference in his diocese, anticipating Rome's move. He played the martyr. "Certain reactionary sectors in the Vatican are persecuting pastoral bishops who are simply trying to make the Church relevant for the modern world," he declared, his expression defiant. "It is a witch hunt. We are being attacked for defending an open church, a church that dialogues with the contemporary world." His carefully calculated words found an immediate, devastating echo in progressive media. They framed the impending canonical investigation not as a defense of the faith, but as a political purge of progressive voices by a rigid, fearful curia. The war had moved from the quiet rooms of the Vatican to the global public sphere. The papal apartments vibrated not just with urgency, but with the pressure of a world watching. And this was only one front in the war. Simultaneously, the Holy Father was battling the monumental influence of the Latin American titan, Cardinal Velasco. Velasco's crisis was theological and political. The bishop's crisis was treasonous and internal. The Pope was forced to address both at once. The documents concerning Velasco detailed a profound abuse of power across an entire continent. Velasco had cultivated a network of influence, trading doctrinal compromise for political security. He systematically blocked Vatican directives and crushed orthodox voices, using his influence to run the Church in the Americas with or without Rome. The crisis of the three bishops was a wound in the flank. The crisis of Velasco was an assault on the head. Both demanded Leo XIV to wield the sword of doctrine, and both threatened a schism of fire. It was the night before the scheduled summons of Cardinal Velasco. The final report, the cumulative evidence on both the South American Titan and the three European betrayers, was laid before Pope Leo XIV. I stood post as the Pope rose from his prayer. His face was a mask of cold resolve. Choice was clear: protect the truth or seek temporary false peace. The pastor chose the truth. The first summons went out to Cardinal Velasco. It was delivered discreetly, demanding his presence the next morning. No explanation, just the unassailable authority of the pontiff. I knew that the next day would be a historical moment, a confrontation that would define this papacy and perhaps fracture the unity of the Church. My duty was to observe, to protect, and to be the silent witness to the clash of titans. Velasco arrived the following morning, alone. He walked with the heavy, self-assured confidence of a man who believed his influence was too vast, his network too entrenched, for any one person, even the Pope, to challenge him. He glanced dismissively at the guard as he approached my post, barely slowing his stride. I opened the door to the papal study. He stepped inside, into the presence of the Vicar of Christ. The door closed, leaving behind an unbearable silence, the sound of two immovable forces finally meeting. I imagined the Pope holding the documents of betrayal, his heart grieving but his will fixed on the immutable truth. After 20 minutes, the Pope's voice cut through the silence, clear and firm, the steel entering the pastor's resolve. "Eminence, your hands have strayed from the shepherd's crook to grasp the scepter of power. I cannot allow this. I have invoked the highest authority granted to me by God. Effective immediately, you are relieved of all your offices, dignities, and responsibilities." The confrontation was over. The door opened. Velasco emerged. The mask of power was gone. His eyes burned with a terrible, cold resentment. He spoke not to the guard, but to the air, to the stone, to the ancient foundations of Rome. "The Holy Father has chosen the sword of doctrine over the shield of unity." He paused, letting the silence swallow the first sentence. Then came the chilling final prophecy. "He has made a grave mistake. He has solved a crisis of faith, but he has invited a schism of fire." He turned and walked away, his robe suddenly looking like the vestments of a man ready for war, not worship. Velasco's words were his activation. He had been deposed, but he was now free to be a martyr and a revolutionary. Within hours, his allied bishops issued statements of profound disagreement. Protests erupted in front of nunciatures across Latin America, organized with political precision. The governments allied with Velasco cut their ties with local Catholic loyalists. The financial fire dried up. The unity of the Church was being torn, diocese by diocese.
The Pope, isolated but resolute, retreated into his private apartments. The silence, his only company. We, the Swiss Guard, doubled the security. Velasco's threat, a schism of fire, was now a political reality. The crisis with Velasco was public. The problem of the three bishops required a different approach, surgical, immediate, and utterly discreet.
2 nights after Velasco's dismissal, the papal apartments were once again alive in the dead of night. Special apostolic delegates, men from the curious security apparatus, were moving swiftly. They were not uniformed guards, but loyal priests, theologians, and auditors, carrying warrants signed by the Pope himself. The plan: a synchronized pre-dawn operation to deliver the canonical sentences and seize control of the 3 bishops' diocesan headquarters and private archives before they could destroy the remaining evidence or rally political support. I observed the delegates moving through the corridors. Their faces were grim, reflecting the gravity of their mission. They carried sealed papal documents, the instruments of deposition, and they carried the authority of the chair of Peter. At precisely 4:30 a.m., simultaneous calls were placed from the Vatican to 3 different European cities. The bishops, sleeping soundly in their episcopal residences, were awakened by the phone call or by the arrival of the papal delegates at their doors. The message delivered was swift and final. By decree of His Holiness Pope Leo XIV, citing grave offenses against the unity and integrity of the deposit of faith, you are immediately relieved of all episcopal faculties, jurisdiction, and office. You are ordered to refrain from all public and private exercise of ministry. Apostolic officials are now taking control of your diocesan administration and seizing all related archives. The stunned reactions were relayed back to the Vatican by secure line. One bishop wept uncontrollably, pleading for mercy. Another cursed the Curia and the Pope, threatening legal action with secular courts. The third simply hung up, his silence a terrifying sign of his likely future defiance. The crucial step was the seizure of the archives. This was not about punishment. It was about protecting the future. The delegates, aided by local, loyal clergy, worked through the dawn, sealing entire filing cabinets and computer servers. What they found, once the initial reports reached the Vatican, was sickening. The documents confirmed a vast, hidden network of influence designed to reshape the Church into a progressive political organization. Evidence of financial manipulation to fund ideological groups. Protocols for silencing and discrediting Orthodox priests. Memos detailing plans for future, radically heterodox liturgical reforms to be implemented simultaneously across the 3 dioceses. The betrayal was more comprehensive, more chilling than the initial audit had revealed. These were not just bad shepherds, they were saboteurs, attempting to rewire the very DNA of the Church. When the news of the 3 sudden pre-dawn expulsions broke, accompanied by the official papal decree citing grave error against the deposit of faith, the media frenzy was instantaneous. The crisis of Velasco was now compounded by the crisis of the 3 bishops. The narrative was cemented. Pope Leo XIV is purging the Church. Progressive media exploded with outrage. The term Night of the Long Knives was used to describe the expulsions. But the diplomatic consequences were immense. Governments who had supported the bishop's progressive social policies expressed deep concern about the Vatican's authoritarian methods. Threats of reduced diplomatic status and political retaliation were whispered through official channels. The Secretariat of State became a fortress under siege. The Pope had done what was necessary, but the Church was now reeling from the public perception of chaos and division. I stood post in the days following the purge. The Pope, Leo XIV, carried the weight of both continents. He had lost his most powerful cardinal and 3 of his bishops in a week. He had defended the faith, but he had lost the temporal peace. His papacy was now defined by this necessary, brutal amputation. He knew that the traitors, Velasco and the 3 expelled bishops, were not finished. They had lost their titles, but they still commanded networks, resources, and influence. They would use their perceived martyrdom to rally the discontented, turning the schism of fire into an open, raging conflagration. The battle for the soul of the Church was now openly declared. It was waged in the media, in political capitals, and in the hearts of every Catholic forced to choose between unity without truth and truth without unity. The Vatican remains the ancient heart of the Church, but it is no longer quiet. It pulses with tension, suspicion, and the knowledge that the greatest threats come not from without, but from within. My uniform, the colorful, anachronistic uniform of a soldier of God, is a symbol. It signifies an enduring mission. My name is immaterial. My function is eternal. I am the silent, unmoving guardian of the truth. I saw the Titan fall. I saw the bishops betrayed. I heard the chilling prophecy of the schism of fire. The war is not over. The deposed cardinal still moves in the shadows. His allies await their chance, and the archives hold secrets that could yet cause further damage. My vow is to the Vicar of Christ, to the integrity of this eternal city, and to the deposit of faith. I stand here, halberd in hand, watching. The light of Rome may dim, but the watch must never end. You have heard the testimony of the silent witness. You have seen the price of truth. The question remains, when the schism of fire burns, will you choose the warmth of comfortable consensus or the cold, hard light of the immutable faith?